Welcome back, everyone, to the Late Night Review. And tonight I want to talk about really one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and a movie that I think is a great sequel, Psycho 3 with Anthony Perkins. Now, this movie, I'll tell you something, the Psycho series, Anthony Perkins, just a fantastic series. It's one of the best horror franchises ever because every sequel is solid. The first one is a great film, a classic. Part two, I actually like part two probably most of the time. I like it better than all the Psycho movies. Psycho 2, even though I respect the first one, I like it a lot. It's a classic. Just very well made, and it was shocking for when it came out at that time. Shocked audiences, but I like part two better. I think there's more of a ghostly kind of atmosphere to it. I think there's more, it's an interesting mystery. First one's a mystery, so is this one. I think they really do a good job in this one, carrying on the story of Norman Bates. I think the story's a little complex enough to be really interesting, and not so complex where you can't follow it at all. I think keeping a lot of it shadowy and kind of mysterious really benefited that movie, especially when certain things are revealed at the end. I think it works. I think part two is the best most of the time. And I'll get back to that in a second, what I mean by that. Part four is a solid sequel. I like part four, even better than the first one by a little. Part two and three, I'll tell you, I go back and forth which one I like better between two and three. If you're going to ask me which one's the better film, I would hand it to part two. I think that deserves to be called the better film. Which one entertains me the most? Three. Part three. Because you got the sketch artist in part three and the man that was in Body Parts, Jeff Fahey. I always liked Jeff Fahey. I liked him in Body Parts. That's a movie I have a lot of nostalgia for. I saw it as a kid over and over and over again. And Jeff Fahey playing Duke in here, he's just a low character. He's not a good guy at all, in it for himself, a bad guy. But his sense of humor, the way he acts, Jeff Fahey, not only brings the character to life, he's playing kind of a scummy character, but he does it well. Jeff Fahey does pretty much every character that he plays well. And Body Parts, that's a great movie. You should check it out. But in that Body Parts, the title could be a little misleading. Body Parts is a horror movie and a drama and a very well done movie. And if memory serves me right, I think not Eric the Red, but Eric Red, if I'm remembering his name right, the same guy who helped write or wrote The Hitcher, played with Rutger Hauer and C. Thomas Howell. I think he wrote The Hitcher, if memory serves me right, in Bad Moon. I think he wrote Bad Moon, which was a good movie. That was one of my favorite werewolf movies. It's kind of a hidden gem, but I think Eric Red wrote those. And he also, I believe, wrote this, if memory serves me right. And that's a good movie. When I say this is a good movie, I'm talking about Body Parts with Jeff Fahey. I think that's a good movie. You should check it out. In Psycho 3, he plays Duke, and he wants to be a singer. But first he gets a part-time job working at the Bates Motel with Norman Bates, and they become business partners in a way. Not really business partners, but he works for Norman Bates, and the dynamic between the two characters unfolds, and it's interesting. It's kind of it's dark, but it has funny parts too. But I think Norman Bates is just brought to life so well by Anthony Perkins. My favorite sequel of the franchise, sometimes it's part two, sometimes it's part three. Part two is the best movie, I think, of the franchise, but part three entertains me more, but both are entertaining. Part three, sometimes I'll choose that. So if I ever do a ranking on the Psycho movies one day, it's going to be tough to decide which one I personally like the best. Part two, I think, is a better film, but sometimes when I'm into my dark humor type attitude and mode, I like to watch Psycho 3. I think it is well made, well directed. Anthony Perkins directed this too. And I think that it must have been very hard. It's hard to direct, especially if you're directing and acting in the film. So I'm sure that was taxing on him. And you could probably see that in the movie a little bit, where you can see he's a little, he's different in here, but in a way, I think this is he's actually funnier in here. He's kind of funny in all of them, but here I think his humor comes out a little more. You can see he's kind of stressed out a little bit, I think, because he's working hard and he's taken on a lot. But I think Perkins does a good job in here, and it's got some dark humor in here, certain one-liners, and certain the expressions on Perkins' face when certain things happen, when the sheriff shows up and questions him, when he's in certain situations that are serious. He's got that kind of, that he kind of lifts the eyebrow, and he's got those facial expressions that are really funny. I've always been entertained by Anthony Perkins' movies. And this movie here, it has suspense. The music is good. I think all the music in all the Psychos are good. They're mysterious, thrilling, ghostly. The hotel, motel, Bates Motel, but the motel and then the house, especially the house, always looks iconic. It's a character all by itself. It looks creepy, scary, eerie. Anthony Perkins just brings not only his character to life, but the fact that when he's in these movies, he passed away years and years ago, but just what a great franchise. But when he's in the movies, he just brings such an atmosphere to him. He is Norman Bates, and to me, he'll always be the best Norman Bates. Doesn't mean they can't remake it and do a good job, and it doesn't mean new actors can't be in there. I always thought Colin Farrell would have made a good Norman Bates. And one of the reasons I say that is because he was in a movie with Bruce Willis called Heart's War. And if you ever seen that movie, he looks like Anthony Perkins in there. Colin Farrell, he's good at action. He does different roles. He can play almost anything, I think. He's a really good actor. I think he'd be a good Norman Bates. I really do. He looks like Anthony Perkins. If you've ever watched Anthony Perkins as a young man when he was younger, and Colin Farrell, and you compare them, to me, they look very similar. And I think he'd make a good Norman Bates. Heart's War with Bruce Willis and not Anthony, Colin Farrell was a good movie. World War II setting, and there's a prison camp in there. It's a drama, very well done movie. When I saw him in that movie, I thought, gee, he looks like Anthony Perkins. He looks like Anthony Perkins in his earlier days when Perkins was younger. Anthony Perkins has had an illustrious career. Excuse me. He left behind a really great body of work. He was in, I think it was called 10 Star with Henry Fonda. He was in Fear Strikes Out. It's a true story about a baseball player. He was in Pretty Poison. That's a movie that might be a hidden gem if you haven't seen that. Him and Tuesday Weld. It was a drama. It's a little kind of like a Bonnie and Clyde, but a lower level deal. Really, I thought it was a good movie. But Perkins has done a lot of work that I've appreciated. He was in a movie that I consider a dark comedy called Edge of Sanity. It was a movie about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And it's dirty. There's parts in there that I don't like. There's parts in there that piss me off, frankly. There's certain parts in there I don't like. But I'll tell you this, I was entertained by a lot of it. And if you went to the horror section back in the day and looked for it to rent it, it would be in the horror section. If you went to the video store, I'm saying, it would be in the horror section. I think it's a dark comedy myself. I don't recommend it for everybody, but definitely an adult audience, in my opinion. But it made me laugh, and there's certain parts in there that are kind of creepy, but mostly is like a dark comedy. Perkins, his expressions is funny, but Psycho 3 is the better movie. Psycho 2 is probably the best movie of the Psycho franchise. I think Psycho 3 is better than Edge of Sanity, but they both entertain me. I go back and forth between Psycho 2 and 3, but Psycho 3 is fun. I mean, it's a horror movie. It's got some comedy in there. Everyone pretty much knows the story of Norman Bates. If you haven't seen this movie, it's a good one. It's worth checking out. I like Psycho 3, got a lot of nostalgia for it. I think Perkins, as bad of a character he plays in here, he's got those facial expressions and certain things he says and does that he always kind of draws sympathy. I mean, he always, I don't know, he's a sympathetic character as bad as he is. He's funny. This movie's dark and with some humor, so you might like it. This has been the Late Night Review. Like and subscribe, please, and take care, everybody, and have a good night.